Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a discussion we are going to have here live on Facebook and on YouTube. And it's my privilege to welcome Mr. Chris Wessels to this conversation. Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
Lekker, thanks. Shakespeare.
Yeah, I'm doing very well, hey. Before we get started, I think we should really quickly talk about you getting these big picks now. What's up with this this push-up challenge?
Pics, like pictures. What big pictures am I on? That's an interesting one. I just finished the 25 push-ups for 25 days challenge, and that was to highlight and bring awareness to post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety and suicide without making this too heavy. It was like the most amazing thing that I've actually experienced. There were people that I met, and I mean, the guy that challenged me to do it, Ntokozo Zama, is a good friend of mine and kind of a work colleague, is one of my clients, challenged me to this thing, and I've never done push-ups in my entire life. But if someone challenged you to do this thing, do it, because I mean, it challenges you as well. And throughout this lockdown, it actually helped me to like sort of mentally free myself as well. And every morning you wake up and go, I've got to do this at some point today. And, you know, so 25 push-ups, it sounds like, I got this. But like at 20, you go like, and then you're in front of the camera doing push-ups, and then it's pressure, dude. It's like, yeah, anyway.
Yeah, it is quite difficult to do 25 push-ups. I know this. And, I have done a little bit of training last year, but not this year at all. Yeah, no. 25 is quite steep. Well done.
I mean,
did you do all 25 days?
I did. Okay, at day 20, I pulled a muscle. And not over here on my stomach, so it's the weirdest thing. And I had to stop for a week. So I rested for about 5-6 days, and I finished the rest of the 5.
Well done for pulling through. I once remembered I did a hackies, hurdles in school, and I was always leading with my one foot, which is wrong. You should do both. And close to the finish line, I was like second or something. I lead it with my left foot, the wrong foot, and I didn't finish the race. And I will never ever forget the disappointed my mom showed me not finishing the race. And she told me, you'll never ever ever not finish something that you've started. And I think I'm doing okay so far.
I'm going to throw a spatter in with all the viewers over here. So with Axe, you're going to finish what you started, right?
Of course, yes.
So I had to.
I will. Yeah, no, I understand. It looks like Andre is here. We can only see Facebook user on this chat unless you give StreamYard permission to use your name. But I think it was Andre that's watching us, so we have to talk sense. Otherwise, he's going to kick me off this whole thing, you know.
He's like, I was going to put like that logo that he normally has up here and pull it off, but yeah, I thought that I've got sensitive viewers maybe watching, and I know you don't like that name there. So anyway, Andre, hello.
So last week you WhatsApp me a few questions because you were busy on a job with some technical questions regarding frame rates, and I thought that, well, won't this be a great discussion? We won't have to really go into the biggest technical depths and things like that. But I thought that this could be a great discussion, and rather me just telling you my thoughts behind it, share it with our community. So thank you for for allowing me to do this on the internet and do this with me. I think it's super cool.
I must thank you, because I'm going to be learning now, and I need this lesson. This is like, yes, it's like when you first start learning about ISO, speed, and aperture, it's like very, very confusing. Once you get it, I think it becomes a lot easier. And this is a subject on videography and cinematography that it's just like, it's not sitting in my head there yet, and I don't know where to go. So you're going to be helping me. So I thank you, Pierre. Thanks, man.
No, of course. I'm not the most technical guy when it comes to this, but I have some knowledge. And then I would obviously like to ask you a little bit more about shutter speeds, because I only know from the top of my head that the 1/25th of a second is the go-to. And then I don't really know for what to use for specific scenarios. So this will be a great discussion towards photography as well. So which one do you think we should do first?
Well, I think let me clap off my questions and then we can ride that wave.
Okay, 100%.
Okay, so I had a job last week where I had to go and do video on a flag, and it's like a waving flag. And I shot some video, and I got back in and started editing on Premiere. And I wanted to like slow the flag down at a point where it just like does that like beautiful like slow, because when the wind's doing this to a flag, it's not looking too great. And if you have a moment just to slow it down, but what I found that when I slowed it down, it gets that jagged like frame rates. So the flag would, it wouldn't flow into that like very beautiful slow motion, like the creamy shot that you need, Did some research, and I know and I understand about frame rate, but my understanding was shooting at 24 frames per second. This is where my question is now. I saw that if you shoot 60 frames per second, you have a better frame rate. So when I looked at my camera, I saw that it doesn't have 60 frames per second. So I did some more research. I've got the Canon 5D Mark III. If I switch my camera to PAL and not NTSC, then all of a sudden it gives me 60 frames per second. But now shooting on PAL is like something completely different. And this is where my confusion comes in. Why PAL? Why NTSC? And how do I shoot at 60 frames per second or whatever frame rate to get that ability to slow things down on Adobe Premiere or whatever you're using in editing to get that like slow motion effect, whether it's a person running or whatever it is. So that's kind of where I'm at. Just to add on to that as well, I know there's a rule as well that if you're shooting at 24 frames per second or 25, you should be shooting at double that on the shutter speed. So your shutter speed should be set at 50. If you're shooting on 50 frames per second, it should be set on 100 as a rule. So I don't understand the equations of how that all comes together. So I don't know if it's like that on normal video cameras or the ones that videographers use, but those are the settings that I'm sitting with on my DSLR. And like you said earlier, and in previous videos, these days when you go to a client and he sees you with a digital camera, or she sees you with a digital camera, they automatically assume, okay, this oak can do video as well. So yes, we do have to wear different hats. So also in this day and age, video is on par with photos. Photos used to be so useful, but with digital age and like social media, video is becoming a huge thing. And for a photographer to be able to do video and both is just another feather in your cap. It gives you better leverage on your clients. It gives you more abilities, and you keep your clients.
Of course. So this, Chris. If I were a doctor, I would have told you that this is all normal to go through all these. But what is going on? How does it work? So I think what we should do is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly start at the very beginning of frame rates. So this is going to look a little bit. Oh, I can actually do that. That is amazing. I just want to get the correct. Yes, yes. So let me show you this. Can you see? Can you see this now? Yeah, you can. Okay. So this was. I don't know if you've seen this photo. So this is where frame rates actually where motion picture basically started. So this guy, he thought that when a horse runs, there has to be a time that all his legs are in the air. And what they did was they put 12 cameras next to each other with trip wires across the pitch. And as soon as the horse runs through those trip wires, it would take a photo. And these were the 12 photos. Okay, I don't think maybe these are the exact ones, but that is what happened. And as you can see, it actually, they were correct. But then they realized, so I'll share this website. It's a great website. It tells you everything of the horse in motion. So they took 12 photos, and then they started seeing that you can put these photos, because basically what it is 30 or 25 or 24 photos per second that your camera takes. But you can go and read all about it and see how they did different scenarios with athletics, because obviously slow-mo works much better with something that's moving than something that's static. Sometimes I use slow-mo when I just want the image to be a little bit more static as well. For instance, when I shoot drone shots, not all the drones have a function where you can slow down the footage, but I tend to slow it down just a little bit, but I'll get to that now. So let me just copy this address so that if there's people following along, that they can go and check this out now. I'll post it quickly in the comments, and I hope that it will go to YouTube and Facebook. Okay, so that is where it basically started with motion picture. So with film cameras, what they did was they just doubled this. They went to 24 frames per second. And that is what those films were. It works just exactly like a normal camera film, but made for video or film. And then that reel will run at 20, each 24 photo reels will pass the lens in a second. And that's how they started with 24 frames per second for film. Now you had the question where you have 24 frames, 25 frames, or 30 frames, NTSC, PAL. So basically, now there's a whole technical discussion. I'll quickly show you this tab as well. Stop that. Let's share this one. And I think it's called, it's this one. So here there you can see the horse again. And this, they will tell you exactly what 24, 25, 30. And we'll get back to this picture just now. So basically in America, I think it was for the way that it was transmitted, they used 30 frames per second as their go-to frame rate. So what they did was, they called it NTSC. And NTSC is still used today. You'll see it in documentaries. You can see NTSC in soap dramas, series. There's more frames. I think your eye is also much closer to 24 frames per second than, so you have this smooth image. Everything is smooth. So if I do this now, you can see that there's some motion blur, and we'll get back to motion blur in a second. In South Africa and European nations, so NTSC is for American nations,
Right.
US nations, and PAL is for European. And we shot on 25. So whenever I have to hand in something to SABC, CakeNet, whatever, it has to be in 25 frames per second. Now, a beauty came along, and we can start to put videos on YouTube. Because I like more cinematic footage, and our eyes are used to cinematic footage or film footage shot in 24, I can now suddenly deliver in 24 frames per second, which is obviously so much nicer for me. I mean, I'll show you some differences now, some examples now, and the amount of motion blur you get with less frames per second is much more pleasing for me. It's a subjective thing, mainly because a power supply in America. Oh yes, I read that one or two other countries, that was the reason for NTSC. They ran a 60 hertz, and in SA they ran PAL, which is in 50 hertz. So that was the main reason for the electricity power supplies. But that's getting much more technical. I'm talking now about what's pleasing for me. So 24 frames has a little bit more motion blur. Now people ask why 23.976, and that is also a very technical question. That is because it had some syncing issues with audio when shot on 24 frames. You can see the math on the internet, how it dropped frames, and dropped frames in video is a no-no. And we'll get to that now as well. So when let me just find my thought again. I was at 24 frames. So waar was ek, Chris? I get now myself here.
Motion blur, and you wanted to show me some examples.
Yes, motion blur is much more pleasing for me. Okay, so let me quickly, I just want to see which one. All right, this is the one I want to show you. I'm just going to share another tab here on my Chrome quickly. And it's that high one. I will supply all these links.
After this.
Hey?
Is there going to be an exam after this?
Yes, of course. You guys don't know it yet. So here you can see, so let's say that this is a second, all right? And then 10 frames a second equally spaced, 15 equally spaced, 30, which is NTSC, all right? 45 and 60. So the more frames you have, the more information you have. All right, the more you can eventually slow it down. That's what we want to get to.
Yeah.
So here you can see an example of motion blur as well. You'll see the top one, which is in 50 frames. It looks like one line running across the screen. 25, you can see it has a little bit of motion blur. Look, all these lines finishes exactly at the same time, that frame, if you understand what I say there.
Yeah.
And then the last one is the 12.5 frames, which is close to what they did with the horse in 100 pictures. Then here you can see a good example. At the bottom, you can see the motion blur very, very good at 30 frames. Now, this is also NTSC. I like a little bit more motion blur. And then at the top, you can see 60 frames. Now, you can interpret footage differently. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I just want to see here. All right, here's I'll supply all the links. I don't think we'll have time to get to everything, but I have some footage that I shot in 60 frames. I just have to find it now again. There we go, there. And you'll see exactly what I mean with it being much more choppy. Let's just stop that quickly. Sorry, I have to obviously open up everything. Can't do everything at once. There we go. Okay, so here you can see this was, I'm still working on this video. So this I shot at 60 frames per second. Okay. Play, man. Speel. Why doesn't it want to play? Okay, I have to try again. Sorry, it happens. It happens. Let's go like that.
People on social media are very, very chill.
Hey?
People on social media are super chill, so don't even worry.
Okay, cool. Yeah, they never given me flack for nothing. All right, so here you can see that it's almost, it doesn't feel that pleasant because there's a lot of information.
There's 60 frames.
So I shot this at 60 frames. Okay, so now you can see that this is quite choppy. All right.
Yeah.
Now what we do with Premiere. So now I'm going to open up Premiere and I'll show you what we do with 60 frames a second in Premiere. Now it's screen sharing again. Here we go, application there. Okay. So now hopefully you guys can follow along. So what I do is I add my media there. Okay, so there's the clip. Now I can, what I usually do is I just say new sequence from clip. So I know that it's the settings that I chose on the camera, because as soon as you start a sequence, all your footage needs to be the same. It's gonna get messed up if you put 30 frames in here and other different frame rates. But now when I press play, you'll see that it's still the choppiness and it's not slow-mo. So the correct way of doing this is to interpret the footage. Modify, interpret footage. And what I like to do, because it's at 59,9401, that's what my camera records, is to go to 976. And now I interpreted that footage. I say okay, and you will see immediately that it's slower, and you will see that there is much more slow-mo and butteriness in there. So that is how you use 60 frames, and now suddenly you can see that that's the shot that I wanted, was that reveal shot of Alvin there.
That you can put that clip and then you've got that nice slow motion turn around. You kind of get rid of all the camera shake if you're doing it handheld without a gimbal.
This was with a gimbal, but even on 60 frames, you do get some, because you have so much information that you try to capture. So okay, I'll get to some questions now. That what we have.
Don't lose your trail of thought. Just we'll get to the questions maybe just after you've got your explanation down. That's good.
Yes. So now you can go even higher than this. Okay, and I just want to see if I have this ready. And this is one of the main reasons why I choose to shoot on Fujifilm, is because I can get 120 frames per second. Okay, so now I will show you what 120 frames per second looks like. You just saw 60 now, and now I'm going to show you 120 frames per second. And it's that one. And here you will see what the difference is. I'm going to play. So this was at Francois van Cooke and in Pretoria last year. So this is 120 frames per second. So already you can see that information shooting at 24. Don't do everything in slow-mo. I'm a huge slow-mo fan. So for me, yeah, I can speed ramp into it and make things slow where I want. So what I did was I went from a fast clip into that clip where Vaynant jumps and then he's frozen almost in the air, and I take it out again.
So now
So
is that shot at 120, and you've
yes.
slowed it down like the way that you showed us in
So
Premiere.
on Canon and Fuji, the Fuji gives me 5 times 24 frames. So that adds up to 120 frames per second. And it does that in body. If it's artificial or not, I haven't seen any artifacts with the 120 frames per second. But shooting 4K on the X-T3 or X-T4 now, you can shoot 4K, but it still captures the audio. On that clip, I didn't have the audio. So I have 60 frames with audio, and then I can interpret it to the part I want to 60 frames. And yeah, so that's how I use it. So on Canon, you can see that is when I shot on Canon. That's how I almost jinxed the system, because I was so used to shoot in PAL, because we have to do everything in 25 frames for South African TV, but it's not ending up on TV. So why am I shooting in PAL? It's not going to short circuit or something like that. So I score another 10 frames per second if I can go and shoot on 60 instead of 50 when I shoot, if I choose to shoot on PAL. So you have to remember, the first thing you have to ask yourself, that's the first thing I ask my client, is where does this need to end up? If it only ends up on Facebook or on YouTube, it's fine. You can go and shoot at the frame rate you really want to. If it ends up on TV, you have to unfortunately stay within their rules. Although I've always asked the question, how do they still broadcast movies on South African TV if it was shot, or even soap operas if it was shot on 30 frames per second? But you'll see, if you get a Handycam, which I do live footage with, I saw that there was a question about that. It's you usually don't get the option for 24 frames or 23.976. You have 25 or 30 as your go-to. So I usually just tend to go to 25, because I really like that little bit more motion blur. But if you watch a sport game on TV, that will probably be 30 frames per second. So in a nutshell, I think I hope I've answered. Did I answer all the questions that you asked?
Do you shoot everything on 120 frames per second, or do you chop and change during the event?
I do chop and change a lot. I chop and change a lot. When I shoot something like music or theater, I have to have a variety of feels to it. So for me, it's very important. I try to get my wide of the whole setup. Then I would try to get something in real motion. I sometimes I'm stoked, and then I use my 60 frames as my 24 or 30 frames to put that in. But I swap a lot. So if you get stuck on 120, you're going to get stuck in the editing suite. But you can always speed up. You can't always speed down or slow down. That is why it got choppy, because when you shot that flag in 25 frames, you tried to create a slow-mo by adding a frame in between of all those 25 frames to slow it down. But the information simply wasn't there. Now in Premiere, I use Premiere as my NLE, a nonlinear editor, and for Premiere, there is a function where you can select optimal flow. For instance, when you didn't, you wish something was in slow-mo, you shot it at 24 frames, you wish it was at 60, or then you can take your speed, you can left click on, for instance, let me show you quickly, let's go back to Premiere. What you can do then is you can go to the beginning of your clip or the end. You'll see that there's a little effects button. If you right click on that, you get these options, and then there's time remapping, and then you can choose speed. Then you just have to make this track bigger, and there's your speed bar. So now this was at 60, but I want it to be at 120 frames. So now I can slow it down by 50%. And you'll already see a red line, probably. Okay, so there's no red line. I'm lucky. But you can see the audio is already out of sync now. And if I play it, you can see there's information missing. You can see that stuttering. Okay, there's information missing. So now what you can do, I'm just going to do this small bit here, add in and out point there. And then I'm going to say, now I haven't, motion. No, it's not that. Where you can say sequence, render in and out, or render selection in and out. That's not actually what I want. But you can choose optimal flow. Where did I get that? Where you can actually, you just tell it to use optimal flow, time interpolation. You see that, and there you get optimal flow.
Okay.
If you choose that, now you can see there's a red line. So that's not rendered at all. But you can remember that it was a bit choppy now, right? So now if you go sequence, render in and out, it might take a few seconds for us to do this.
Let's do that, let me ask you a question, Pierre.
Yeah.
And I don't want to throw you off now. Just remember where you are, okay?
Yes.
Ben wants to know if you change the frame rate in post from 60 to 30 or from 30 to 24, how does Premiere choose the frames to drop? I think there's going to have to
the frames needs to be equally spaced. So it's gonna stretch it out, and everything that's not in that equally spaced part will be dropped out. As far as I understand it, but that's getting much more technical, and that's where I use my 30 frames when I shoot drone shots. The new DJI can actually do 60 frames and even 120 frames on HD, but that's why I just choose 30 frames, and I interpret it as 23.976 or 24. I usually 23.976 because that's what I work in. And then it just makes it a little bit more smoother. So that's how I get away with it. But if you shot at 12 frames, that information is simply not there. I don't know if there's a camera that can actually do that. So yeah, you as long as the information is there. Look now at the photo it's playing. Can you see that it's actually smooth?
Yeah.
Excuse me. So what Premiere does is it looks at the information and it copies all the frames that's not there. It puts it in. It doesn't work on everything, but here it works beautifully. There you can see the stutter again because it's not rendered out.
So I've got a new question. This is from me.
See that.
So I shot video per se, okay? So, and I didn't have a gimbal with, and I shot some stuff and I wanted to move around a little bit. But now you see my steps and you see my shake and whatever. There's a setting in Premiere. I can't remember. I think it's warp speed or something like that. So that actually
warp stabilizer.
Yeah, warp stabilizer. That's the one. So it actually smooths it down. So, as soon as you go start messing with your frame rate on, or say you take the speed up or down on Premiere, it actually disables you the ability to actually use warp speed. Okay, so it doesn't give you that ability. So I found a little bit of a loophole around that. So you actually go and export that media, and then you pull it back into Premiere again, and then you actually have the ability again to use warp speed. So now in that, sorry, just I want to finish the question.
Yeah.
In that shot that you showed me, when it has that jittery like frame rate thing, what effect will warp speed have on that? Will it smooth it down? But it actually can't put information back in that. What does it do? Do you know?
So what warp speed actually does, so if you interpret your footage, you use that modify interpret footage. As soon as I found that out, that changed my whole slow-mo game, because you can move that speed dial up and down. I don't think it has the same effect than interpreting footage to the correct frame rate. But what warp stabilizer actually does is it crops in a bit, and it shifts the footage in the background around.
Sure. Yeah.
So it does it really, really well. And in After Effects, it does it even better, because in After Effects, you can choose what point. So you select high contrast. So usually we use an eye, where the white of your eye is a high contrast to the skin tone. We select that, and it tries to keep that still in the image, and it works really, 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 really well.
Cool. Are you ready for more questions?
Yes, I am.
So Darren, we'll get back to your random question. I don't know if Pierre wants to maybe go and look at that afterwards. I'll see if we have time. We'll get to that. But Ben says, if I understand correctly, optimal flow adds missing frames by combining the previous and next frame, opposite of dropping frames.
Correct. So that's why it doesn't always work. You'll see some artifacts, especially in people walking. That information is just not there, and there's a lot of moving parts. So if you look closely, you can see some artifacts happening. But on a shot like this, where there's nothing moving in the background, it's only this big body, so the bitrate doesn't have to battle to be on screen. You can actually fill in those frames. It works really well on the ocean as well, and that's why when you use this 24 frames, you have the motion blur that on your side to help with those artifacts as well.
But now you won't be able to get 24 frames per second shot into a slow motion thing. You'll have to shoot like 60 frames to be able to slow that down. So just say I'm at this situation now, I'm looking at the flags now, and I've shot everything, and I go afterwards, I should have actually done it frames, like a slow motion shot. Then I go and I'll shoot that shot. Can I do it with 50 frames per second because I shot on PAL?
Yes, you can. You just interpret it. So there's information there. I don't think you'll be able to slow it down that much. You'll be able to slow it down quite a bit. Yeah. But there's 10 frames that will be dropped in that second instead of 25 100%. Frames that will be dropped. So if you use optimal flow there, it might save your day.
Yeah. Okay, now another one. So I shot all of this, and I shot on NTSC because that's what we've got in South Africa.
No, we've got PAL.
Oh man, I should have shot a slow motion shot. Set my camera to NTSC, and I got 60 frames per second. Does that give me issues in Premiere now if I want to go and edit that together with the PAL footage? Seeing as I'm going to YouTube and maybe a clip on Facebook and Twitter, I'm not going to broadcasting or anything. So I've got the two PAL and NTSC footage. I'm just going to YouTube or Facebook or social media.
I'll take the risk and I'll slow it down 100%. If you had those 60 frames, you can always make it a little bit faster if you really want to, but I'll bump it all the way down, interpret it as 25 frames, see what it does. If there's some jittery, add optimal flow, and I think you'll be surprised with the results. That's what I would do.
the PAL and the NTSC will gel.
It's not supposed to, but yeah, I'll take that risk. So I usually just beforehand, I make a clear decision on what frame rates I'm going to shoot. I'm going to shoot on 23,976. I'm going to shoot at 60 frames, and I'm going to shoot at 120 and 240.
Okay.
And then I don't go.
Maybe go to some
drift.
Of loopholes here. So if I've shot everything in, so say PAL, I come home and I realize that I wanted a slower shot. I want to go back tomorrow. I go and shoot that one shot on NTSC so that I can get that 60 frames per second. I come back, I edit that one little clip that I shot on NTSC and to it what I wanted to. Then I render it as an MP4 and then edit everything as that MP4.
No, you can just interpret the footage, drop it in, interpret the footage to 25 frames and see what it does.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Or you can go the long route and export it at 25 frames after you slowed it down. But essentially, it comes down to the same thing.
I'm going to test
now
it
you also.
I'll see. I've got a flag here, so I'll do a bit of.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see it. Yeah. Then you talked quickly about the 180-degree rule. So that's our shutter speed rule. So we have frames per second, and then we have our shutter speed, obviously opening and closing.
Yeah.
And the rule is to work on doubles. So if you shoot at 50, you will shoot the shutter speed at 100. But if it's still too bright and you don't have an ND filter, that's why we use ND filters in video. It's super, super, super important. I cannot stress this enough, because the faster your shutter is, the more jittery it's going to get, and then it doesn't help. So you won't have the motion blur, because the shutter will be so fast that you'll get all the information there again. So if you stay to that rule, say it's too bright now, go to 150, go to 200, go to 250. So you work in increments like that if your frames are at 50. Otherwise, you'll do 60 frames, 120, 240, 480, and then I'm going to stop because my maths will disappoint me. But you get the point. And obviously, the faster your shutter is, the darker your image gets as well.
Yeah.
And that's why we use ND filters.
Or double the frame rate. You don't want to go over that. So if I'm outside and I'm shooting brightness, would you then rather set your f-stop to complement the, or well,
it depends. It depends what you want to do. So for me, I've
beautiful, like very open aperture shots. Yeah, I understand. I understand.
So if you want to shoot open aperture, you have to put some sunglasses on your camera. And then I have ND filters and variable ND filters, so that works much better for me, with a histogram and trying to keep my histogram in the middle so that I know my exposure is right, because your eyes won't always tell you what you see on the small screens, or histogram is your friend. So I will just dial my ND filter slow so that I do get my 24 frames at my shutter at 50 or 48. And then I will dial my ND filter for the exposure to get my motion blur that I want, and it will make it more cinematic, no doubt about it. Otherwise, it's going to be choppy, and you can see a lot of that. You'll see where people just don't use ND filters, and I think you're shooting yourself in the foot if you don't do that. So.
That could also be why I didn't get that very smooth effect, because my shutter speed might have been completely wrong when I was shooting this back, because it was like 10 o'clock sun, direct sunlight, and I must actually go and check what my shutter speed was there. So I'm thinking like a photographer.
That will help. See, that's the difficult part, because I'm trying to keep my shutter speed as low as possible. Trying to get my motion blur right. If I make it faster, I'm going to lose some of the motion blur, and that butteriness that you really want in your footage, especially with slow-mo.
This weekend I'll run some.
Cool. If you buy music for video, you do include it in your quote. Okay, that's got. I'll quickly answer that. We the company that I have, DPK, we have a license at artlist.io, and that means I can use any music on any platform. So it's already paid, and we just work in a little bit of extra money into the quotes for using that footage, audio. Yeah, it's part of the expenses you have as a production company. You'll have to have library music. Otherwise, your videos will be kicked off very, very fast or not broadcasted in certain countries or whatever. I just don't take those chances. I use Artlist, and there's another one, Epidemic Sound, which is great. You can download all the different stems, but I think it's maybe a conversation for a different time.
But I think royalty, Yolandi also says royalty-free music. There's a lot of royalty-free music. I think if you even go into YouTube, there's
YouTube has a great royalty-free.
It has an amazing library of royalty-free music. You just go, some of the artists actually just require you mention them at the end of the video, and you can use the music for as much as you like. Yeah, there's a lot of royalty-free.
You just have to mention them in the description. Yeah,
correct. And there's a lot of artists that don't even require that. So go to YouTube, just do some searches. It's in the editor suite in YouTube, and it's free stuff. There's tons and tons of amazing, amazing tracks on there.
Taryn also asks if the lens length makes any difference on any of this. No, it doesn't, but the f-stop, how fast it is, does. So, I mean, that will, if your f-stop is closed, your image is going to be darker and you'll have to boost your ISO. But if your camera can handle ISO, no worries. But lenses doesn't matter. No, not for me.
So with photography, you get camera tech and stuff like that. So then you have like rules where you have to put your speeds and stuff. But I think with videography, where it comes in, you don't get camera shake, but you get that jittery movement. So you don't get the smooth flow when you're shooting. So there's gimbals, tripods, and those kind of
in-body stabilization, which this X-T4 that you guys can win is the best in-body stabilization that I've ever seen in my life. IBIS is spectacular. You can almost get gimbal shots out of hand. It works with magnets and not suspensions. It's really super amazing, but I won't do a gimbal shot, try to get it with a hand out. But if you stand like that and you support yourself, you won't notice any shakes with that IBIS.
So Pierre, in your opinion then, because I'm sure you've shot with a Sony A7 or R7 or something like that. I'm not very like
A7S.
A7S.
Or A7 III. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So compare that to the Fuji. Now, you've worked with both. If you would have to make a choice to buy one or, win one today, which one would you prefer?
I would prefer the Fuji because in the long run, the lenses are cheaper. I don't really mind about full frame. The menu is much faster. The whole camera is much more faster for me than on a Sony. On a Sony, I tend to look for buttons all the time and look in the menu where the hell is what, because I do a lot of theater, and then you have to do multi-cameras on theater, and for that there's not a lot of places that rents out Fujis, so I have to rent Sony because the full frame can help you a lot with your ISO, so you don't have to boost your ISO as much. It's much brighter, but yeah, I would prefer the Fuji. The colors are amazing, and in the end, it's a cheaper product. It will take less out of your pocket because Sony is so bloody expensive. But
I mean, the word cheap. I use value for money.
Value for money. That's the right word. Sorry, sorry, Fuji. But
I'm not
yeah,
a
no, it's.
to say.
But talking about stage, and this will go over to you now, is something that I realized, which I was very stupid, and I wanted to kick myself because I always shoot with my lenses wide open, or I used to. So your depth of field and your focus point can shift quite easily. And never ever do theater on automatic focus. It will bugger up your shoot. So then I realized, okay, I have to do it on manual focus. And then because I was at 2.8 or 1.8 on a 50mm with a spoot beaster on a Sony, a Metabones, my actors walked into focus and out of focus still. So I realized, oh, I was stupid. I should have shot at about f11. So the whole on my wide shot. I'm talking especially on the wide shot. The other shots, I mean, you can control your focus what you want. But my actors walked in and out, and it started. It was amateur hour for me. So yeah, f-stop can also help you a lot for if
So this is when
to
autofocus isn't coping. Is that what you're saying?
it fishes for it. So I mean, you want to cut to a camera at any time, so it fishes for focus. And theaters are quite dark, so it does that, or it will just focus or lose focus at wrong times. So you've got this beautiful shot on a face, side angle, MCU, and then maybe have a little bit of movement, and suddenly your camera goes, and you can't use that shot. So manual focus for theater.
That's very interesting. That's super interesting. And also the wider shot, because if you're moving around, it doesn't show the movement of you. The minute you start doing long focal length, then your camera shake and all those things with movement, when you're doing video, is more. When you have a wide angle, it's actually better to just get those smoother movements because it doesn't pick up the shake so much. And it's
correct.
Similar in
that's why if you have to choose, because you have to balance a gimbal, choose your widest lens, and that's the lens that goes on the gimbal, because it looks much better for me personally, a wide angle gimbal shot than if you put a zoom lens on it. It won't work. You need some parallax happening. So I hope that I answered all the questions. Shit, I took about an hour for this. Sorry.
Let's have a part 2, man.
I'm passionate about it. So my question for you is on shutter speeds. I mean, you have your f-stop and you have your ISO when taking photos, but how do you know? I once took photos and I found Henry Engelbrecht the next day, and I asked him, is it normal shooting on 3,000 of a second? Is it normal? What did I do wrong? And he's like, no, yeah, that's fine. It's okay. It feels so wrong shooting with the shutter so fast if you're outside. Do you guys use ND filters for photography?
So I think the first thing that you kind of have to ask yourself is, what are you shooting? And that's, so all these equations where ISO, speed, and f-stop come together, you ask yourself questions first. So if you're shooting landscapes, you want to be on high f-stops. So that's like f16 and up. So like with digital, your sweet spot is normally between like f13, f16 on a lens. Once you go above that, you'll actually start to see that you're losing a little of the sharpness. And it's a digital thing. I'm not sure why. With film, the higher you can go with your f-stop, the better and sharper your pictures become. So you're looking at depth of field, which is similar in film. So if you're shooting a landscape, you want everything in focus, you want a high f-stop. So that'll automatically bring your speed lower, okay? So if you want to slow things down with ND filters, then you're looking at what's your speed ratio going to do. So say I'm in a scenario where I'm shooting an ocean. Let's see if I can share something here. I'm very new to this. We didn't have a dry run, so please bear
We
with
did.
me.
He's lying. He's lying. We did about 2 hours yesterday.
If you trust Pierre, then I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, I'm sharing the screen. I'm going to my application and I'm going to go share that one. Okay, you guys can see this?
They can. Yes. Wow.
Okay. And now I can see you as well. You still see the full screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So when you're looking at shooting something like this, it's sharp from the one edge of the corner right to the back there. You'll see movement in the clouds. You'll see movements in the waves crashing over the rocks in the front here and heading like sides of the pier. If you really go in close, you'll see, I don't know, most of you are probably looking on phones, but there's water dripping off the side of the platform where the pillar is in. So if you're shooting something like this I shot with an ND filter. The idea was to slow down the waves. It was like quite a very, very early morning shot, this. Or was it afternoon? I can't remember now. It was long ago. The light is still quite bright, so it's not like twilight yet. So ND filter, yes. I wanted to slow down the shutter speed so much. So here I'm probably shooting on like close to 25th, 30th of a second to get this like a whole milky, ghostly feel at the bottom there. But I still want everything in focus. See, so there you'll go. Slow shutters with an ND filter, because this is what you want. I'm just trying to think if I've got another scenario in here somewhere. This here is where you want everything in focus still. This is not a drone shot. This was in the good old days where clients still hired helicopters and you'd go flying around and try and get shots out of the air. You're sitting with a whole bunch of issues right here. So what is the first thing you do here is like, I need to shoot at a high shutter speed. I can't shoot this on a tripod. There's just too much shake of the whole chopper. I'm hanging out of the door of a chopper. There's no door. So I'm like harnessed to a little safety hook on the floor. The camera is moving around while the chopper is actually banking around for you to get this shot. So what do you do in your camera settings here? Firstly, you'll go up in your ISO. There's no ND filter here because you don't want to lose light. You want to actually have as much light coming in. So you'll actually bump up your ISO from anywhere to about 500 to even if you've got a full frame camera, it can handle ISO and grain noise. You'll push this up to about like 1,000 ISO even for you to be able to push this. I think this, I don't know if you can see that on the side here, but this is 1,250 ISO that I pushed this on an 800th of a second. Other shots I did on the same one was like 2,500. I'll just try and see if I can get maybe to that one. That's the Durban Harbor and like the beach in front there. This one is 1,000 ISO and 2,500th of a second, and I'm shooting at f1 7.1. So you get into situations where you do want the speed to reduce camera shake, number one, to be able to get at sort of f-stops that you have mostly everything in focus. And I would say 7.1 is kind of pushing it. Everything above f8, you'd on a wide angle, you'd start getting beautiful, like sharpness right through. You'd actually want to go even higher than that. This is a shot of the pier, of the stadium. And this one was also 2,500ths of a second. So in situations like this, yes, you definitely want to increase your speed. There was no ND filter on this, obviously. That would have decreased my speed. And in a situation like that, you don't want this. I'll just go to another slow shutter one. In a situation like this, no ND filter was needed. It's already sort of past the golden hour. The sun is set. It's twilight. You can see this bus on the right-hand side here. This is actually close to the post office in the Joburg CBD. So you'll see the streaks of the lights of the bus and the cars going past. This was probably also about like 13th of a second. And this is quite wide. Here my ISO is 50, which isn't ideal. I'd normally want to shoot on like 100 ISO. I didn't have an ND filter here. This was like a last minute thing. I just wanted to stop and get the shot. And this is shooting at f6.3. I could have possibly gone up to f11 to get more sharp, but here you'll drop the shutter speeds to be able to get this nice blur and stuff. I didn't want to freeze things here. I'll show you just one more of these where you get the idea. So this is stop and start of the taxis. I don't know if you get to see on your small screen on your phones, but you can see this. The taxis actually stopped and they kept going again. This is 20.
That's so cool.
Sorry, a 20-second exposure. I think I gave you the wrong exposure on the previous one. That is 13 seconds, not a 13th of a second, it's 13 seconds. That one is 20th of a second. So they'll stop for the robot and then they'll carry on going. So you get that streaking light. And here, there's almost no light left in the sky. But because you keep the shutter open so long, it actually gives you the feeling of this is shot in daylight. Here's another scenario. It's a really good buddy of Quaid. That's another scenario I wanted to show you. So,
that's you.
160 a second at f2.8. Yeah, you want to slow down. Capture the speed. There was actually a little bit of flash on this as well. This I wanted to show this one, but not yet. I'll go back to Quaid. Okay. Let me be very careful what I push now. Just now you see other pictures that I don't want you to see. So this is also a scenario where you want to sort of capture a frozen moment. He's a breakdancer, so this guy is an incredible performer, Old Quaid. Calls himself Flip. Here, he's jumping into the air. You want to freeze his motion. I've got two flashes here. So it's off-camera flash, one on the right-hand side. There's actually three. One on the right-hand side, one to the back of a 45-degree angle with a bit of a red gel, and a blue gel on the left-hand side, also towards his 45-degree angle back. So here, you've got a few problems that you got to think of. One, you want to use light because you're controlling the light. It's a late afternoon shot, so he's standing in shadow. I wanted to create, with a flash, the blue gel and the red gel, which you can't really see. You can see there's a bit of a red shine there, and then filling in from the front. With flash photography, you have a situation where you can't sync over 200. So ideally, you would want to shoot this at a high shutter speed, but because of the flash duration, you can't really go above 200th of a second unless you have high speed sync, which I could have done here, and I didn't do that. I didn't have the right equipment for that. So with Godox triggers, and there's a lot of other triggers, you can shoot high speed sync, and you could actually sync this at a much higher sync and keeping low apertures as well, or like wide open, like f1.4 and whatever, so you can control it a lot more. So there's different scenarios that you use. Here's another scenario where you want to I'm pushing the wrong buttons again. Okay, where you want to kind of freeze motion. And another one, this was 80th of a second, and this was shot at f11, and I pushed the ISO here at 1250 because of flash duration. So flash duration becomes an issue where you want to freeze stuff. The duration of your flash can't be very long. So this also gets very technical. I used speed lights here. So speed lights, if you put them on their weakest setting, which is I think 128th over a second, it actually gives you a very fast flash duration. So it'll emit low light. It won't bounce off of everything. So it's a really, really small little pop of flash, which will freeze things. Where if you put this on its strongest setting and it's like this big bump of light, it's actually what it does. It will bump out the light and then disappear. It'll bump off everywhere, and you won't be able to freeze the little droplets and things like that. So I'm just trying to get back to where, like, you're asking in a situation where you want to use shutter speeds. It's going to depend on your subject. So your first question is, what is your f-stop? What do you want to get? Do you want everything in focus, or do you want to highlight a certain subject? And that's where you start. So then you start equating back. And that's where your speed will come into play. So if you want to shoot wide open, like you love shooting wide open, your speeds will go super high. If you want everything in focus and you starting to close down your lens, which you're going to like f11, f16 and above, then your speeds will all of a sudden slow down tremendously. And if you want to freeze movement, that then becomes an issue. So then you'll have to up your ISO. But if you want movement where there's blur in things, sorry, I'm not pushing the right buttons again.
Whoa.
Hang on a sec. So this is a bus, it's an old Patco bus coming around the bend. So if you're looking, can you see this? I'm not sharing
it. You have to share it again. There we go.
Okay. This is a Patco bus coming around. So in a situation like this, it's also speed that's slowing down again. It's going to depend on what your subject is. And that's going to have an impact on what your ISO settings is, and then, back to f-stop and speed. So I don't know if that kind of answered your question. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So we use ND filters to help us to slow down our camera, essentially, and you use ND filters as an effect rather than
correct.
And that depends on time of day. Obviously, I don't use ND filters at night or inside a venue because it's still quite dark. And then, asking yourself the right questions, that is very important. You have to ask yourself the right questions before you start to shoot. Even when I do the streaming or things like that, what happened this morning, especially, as I forgot to put my phone on the hotspot and I went in and out of the stream. You have to ask yourself all the technical questions. I know we call it run and gun mostly, but you have to get what do you want to, where's this going to end up? Where do I want people to look? Especially, I'm learning so much about photography from the start of this challenge, that you have to decide where the eye needs to go. In video, I can almost force you where I want you to look, because we shoot everything so wide open. Yeah, that's beautiful. And this was also about, is this also f11, f16?
I don't actually have the camera info on this shot. It's not showing me. This is handheld. It's not on a tripod. So I've obviously pushed the ISO. If you really look at the file closely, you'll see there's quite a bit of noise pixelation, but I'd call it grain in the shot, to be able to get the silhouette and the light coming from the back, and then obviously the movement on top there. So if you look at the birds, they're actually moving slightly. You won't be able to see it on your screen, but if you look at the original,
birds are so difficult to shoot.
So there's movement. You'll see movement in the birds. There's a bit of motion blur in them, but yeah, this will be like, I'd probably guess at about f5.6. And the speed, see, this is where, okay, this is another thing. So this is where speed comes in. So you talked about earlier where you have like 60th of a sec, 125th as a rule. 125th of a rule is very safe to say yes. So it's a good safe place to start. If you have a camera with great stabilization, like the Fuji that you used, or you've got amazing image stabilizers within your lenses, and you've got stable hands, I would say you're even safe to shoot handheld at, I wouldn't go, as a rule, lower than 60th of a second. Anything lower than 60th of a second, you're really sort of in the risk area of getting camera shake, where your images won't be sharp anymore. And it's not because they're blurry because of the lens, it's actually because of camera shake. So with guys like Leon Westhuizen, he shoots,
I just wanted to say that now.
15th of a second, and then you get like beautiful motion and like the shaky stuff happening, and that is incredible techniques. But even an image like this, if I was very steady and I have my camera wedged like into my arms and I've got like a steady hold, I could shoot this shot probably sharp enough and go close to like even like 50th of a second, or maybe even slightly lower. But that's really pushing the boundaries of that. Then you've got another little rule. If you've got a 50 mil, it's safe to shoot at 60th, I'd say. But the rule is, so if you've got a 70 to 200 mil, shoot at your focal length. So if you're handheld, you're not on a tripod. If you're zooming in with a 70 to 200 and you're shooting portraits on 150 millimeter on your zoom, it would be safest if you set your settings on 150. So you'll up your ISO a little bit to get to 150, or down ISO to get to 150. If you shoot higher than that, that's fine. So 150th of a second for 150 millimeter focal length, 200 on 200, and so on. So that's kind of a safety rule to kind of get rid of camera shake. If you're shooting on an 85, try and shoot over 85. 85th of a second. That's a nice rule.
Valuable information. I see Taryn also say that you need to know your camera well, and that is for me, that's really important. You get a lot of people in, I just shoot, and they don't know the menu, they don't know their way around the menu, they don't know what the cameras are capable of. And that's fine. Yeah. But as soon as you're in front of a client and something goes wrong and you don't know how to fix it, you're going to walk with your tail between your legs. 100%. It's really important to know your camera and know the abilities of that equipment, what it can do and what it can't do. Yeah. Don't promise anybody something and then you can't deliver. I mean, I can't do phantom shots on my camera. I can't do it 1,000 frames per second or 6,000 frames per second. So if they ask me if I can get a balloon popping where you can see the outer skin going away, I can't. I can get some effect like that, but yeah, you need to know what your gear can do and what it can't do. I think that's very important. Thanks, Darren. That's very, very valuable note there. Yeah, Chris. There's some things that I didn't know. I didn't know about this rule with your lens length where you are. That's information that people can take and obviously create and get better and send us some great photos or hopefully videos. I think it was this discussion was absolutely amazing. That what I heard from you, it was fun telling my side of things, although we don't see a lot of videos. I'd love to see more. Then I can play along. But I
want to do that stop motion thing, man.
Yes, remember this hurdle race. Now this is a great, we made a nice full circle. You have to finish that race. You promised me a stop motion. And it's going to happen. Please, we will still watch the comments. If you didn't watch this live, please still post comments, keep the conversation going. We will comment on all the comments down there. What do cell phones shoot at? That's a good question. Usually 30 frames a second. I have an app. It's called, let me show it to you. It's called Pro Movie. I don't know if it's on Android, but what this app does, it turns your cell phone into basically a mirrorless camera. On this app, I can change my shutter speed, my ISO, my white balance, my exposure, my f-stop, my frames per second, all that. Where on cell phones, you usually tend to be stuck with a few settings. It has a, like, you can check your leveling. I don't know if you can see that little cross there in the middle. Let me try to do this. You can see if you level. So you can always see that you level. You can put stabilization on, off. I have audio monitoring on top. So if you want to use your cell phone, I'll recommend using an app like this because you can customize it, and on a
What's the
gimbal.
lowest frame rate and the highest frame rate on that?
Well, that depends on your phone, but I can do 4K at 60 frames a second. And I can on 120 on 1080p, which is normal footage. I think this video is even on 720. I can go up to 240 frames a second.
Wow, that's pretty neat.
So this app is really, really powerful. Pro Movie. I don't know for Android if there's something like that, but Pro Movie, I'll recommend that, and you'll be blown away because you can even change your white balance. So usually you can't do that on the in-app of the cell phone. It's made for everybody, not for professional users, but doing something like that turns your phone pretty much into a professional camera with a very tiny, small sensor. Yeah, cool, Chris.
That was lekker.
Yeah, a marathon. And now
Yeah,
I
you
can
stole
end the day off. Hey?
You stole the show.
No, I didn't.
Oh, you were
I
like
just
the.
I went
Yeah, dude,
I went into my old docent, my lecturer Pierre, when I used to taught at the university. It's all I know. But you have to explain things, I suppose, in depth. I'm sorry if I stretched it out a bit, but these things makes me tick. It makes me. I'm very passionate about it, and especially the technical side of things.
No, I love that.
So, thank you everybody for watching, and especially thank you, Chris and Yolandi there next to you, your partner in crime. Dankie, Yolandi. And we're looking forward to answer some questions and do more discussions like this.
Thanks everyone for popping in, and thanks guys for the questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris, and we'll see you guys soon again.
You are a
Cheers.
legend.
Cheers.